This is TalkSport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham, and I'm delighted to say that the other part of the two Mikes, Mr. Mike Parry, is here for his second appearance of the week. On this show, I know that you sometimes nitpick and say, well, actually, I've been in on other shows as well.
Of course, yes.
Second appearance on this show. Welcome, and a very happy transfer deadline day to you.
Yeah, welcome, Mike. Great to be here with you again. Thank you very much indeed. As you say, transfer deadline day, which is going to throw up, some remarkable stories, but mostly a pattern of increasing chaos as we get towards the end of it. And I know this is not a very original thought, but the transfer deadline the transfer window itself is a quite ridiculous, restrictive premise in a multi-billion pound industry. What other industry has set limits on when you cannot trade?
Right. Well, certainly a lot of people have been texting in tonight saying things like, it is restrictive on the players. Players should be able to move to another club whenever they want. But I presume that if they did that, though, it would just be chaos, wouldn't it?
No,
players would be getting tapped up all the time.
No.
There would be no, because, I mean, if they were going to do it that way, you'd have to say, well, if you're under contract, you can't go, though, couldn't you?
Well, maybe you could, but then a player goes on strike and he's no good to you there, and you say, right, we'll put him in the stiffs for the rest of the season. They never do. They let the player go at the end of the day. If a player wants to go, he goes. The most exciting transfer I can remember, in my sort of lifetime as a football fan was when Alan Shearer left Blackburn Rovers, where he'd won a Premier League medal. Everybody thought he was heading down the road to Manchester United, and all of a sudden Kevin Keegan nips in and bang, he turns up at Newcastle United. And that happened. Now, I'm not sure if it was October or April. It was either autumn or spring. I think it was October, and there wasn't a transfer window in those days, and it was a world record transfer, £15 million, and it absolutely lit up the football season.
Yeah.
Now, what this does wrong is it crushes everything into pressure points. Now, I'm looking at a piece here. This is not my initiative. This is the Telegraph tomorrow, OK? In the Telegraph Sport, the headline says it gets touchy and you end up arguing, and they go to three people who are the major planks in the transfer window. One is a chairman. They talk to Niall Quinn. The second one is a player, Kevin Phillips. The third one, the medical man, Michael Davison. The player, Kevin Phillips, says this: for the first time in my career, last January, I signed for a new club on deadline day. It turned out to be absolutely manic. And he goes on to say he was rushing around in cars.
Yeah, because people are driving up and down motorways,
exactly.
meeting people at service stations. It's bonkers, isn't it?
Exactly. It's absolutely manic, and you've got to make decisions. The medical man is even more interesting, OK? Michael Davison, football medicine specialist. He says that medical staff, doctors and specialists are being forced into making very, very instant decisions on players' fitness when you're talking about 30 or 40 million pounds worth of football talent being exchanged from one club to another.
And they probably want more time to have a look at them and make sure they're actually all right.
And it's in the interest of the agent and the selling club to say he's fit, but, the club who want to buy him don't want to miss out on the deal. And the whole thing is squashed in and makes everybody panic. We all know that Mr. Levy is the great exponent of taking a transfer to the 11th hour, the 11th hour of the last day until he gets a maximum amount of money, which is what you said to me earlier, what seems Manchester City are going to be involved in sometime tonight. And it just simply does not work. And as I say, Mike, I cannot believe in a multi-billion pound industry you can have such a imagine if Ford were only allowed to sell their cars for a month in January and a month in July. How ridiculous would that be?
That would be ridiculous, absolutely right. But is this not the best system
No.
against all the other systems?
No.
The reason it was brought in the first place was because the bigger clubs would just go and nick players from smaller clubs.
Well, I'm afraid...
and sort of throw money on the ground like the mafia
But
does.
that's the law of the jungle. That's the law of the jungle. It's the food chain. It's the football food chain. Big clubs eat up small clubs. They always will do.
Yeah, but surely then all you would get was big clubs buying all the players off the smaller clubs, and it would be even more unfair in the Premier League than it is now.
Let me give you an analogy here, right? I was once in the Kruger National Park, OK? That's in South Africa. It's the size of Wales, by the way,
Like a
OK?
safari park?
No, not a safari park. Safari Park is a place up in Lancashire where they've got a couple of elephants.
Right.
Knowle Park, or Knowsley Park.
Knowsley Park.
No, the Kruger is the size of Wales. I mean, it's a massive park. Now, we used to go out at 4 o'clock in the morning, OK?
Why?
And to watch leopards catching their breakfast.
So it is like a national park then? You're going out to watch animals?
It's not a national park. It's a vast, I suppose it is a national park, but it's not like Knowsley Safari
Park.
Park.
You pay to get in.
No, exactly. That's right. Yeah, okay. So what I'm saying is, we go out there, and these leopards and lions and all this kind of stuff, they go around grabbing these. Are they called impalas or something?
Yeah, impalas.
Impalas. And it is fascinating to see. Now imagine...
It's a bit bloodthirsty, isn't it?
Well, it is a bit bloodthirsty, yeah. It's not very pleasant. But it's the law of the jungle, this is what I'm saying. The law of the jungle, the food chain...
Or the law of the veldt, even.
The law of the veldt, if you want, yeah. And it's the same in football. Now, imagine if there was a worldwide ban on lions and leopards catching impalas, at certain times of the day or certain times of the week or something like that, then the food chain would break.
Ridiculous analogy.
It's
you can't
not.
put a ban on animals doing what they normally do.
You're putting a ban on what humans normally do, which is trading in a free market society. So what I'm saying is, if you interfere with the food chain, the whole of the ecology of the world will break down. And if you interfere...
Sometimes you have to regulate the food chain. I'm not talking about in Africa. I'm talking about in the transfer market.
You can't regulate it because what you're doing is you are interfering with the free trade market. And if you apply this premise in football to the rest of business, the world trade cycle would collapse, wouldn't it?
How would you like it, for example, if Manchester City decided to come in...
Would the world trade cycle collapse if you restrict it?
Of
course it would. If you restricted people to selling and buying, except for certain times of the year, the whole world would collapse. It's ridiculous.
What if Ross Barkley was sort of pinched by Manchester City and they went to Everton and said, here's 50 million quid, we're going to take him?
Food chain.
And that would be the end of Everton, wouldn't it?
No, it's
because
the food chain.
Because they would just go and pinch all their decent players.
It's the food chain, yes, but there are examples of where young players have made moves like this to try and improve their career and it's all gone wrong. Jack Rodwell of Everton is a very good example. And you see, this is another example, Mike, of where the transfer window is all wrong. Jack Rodwell went during a transfer window. Now, if there wasn't a transfer window, Jack Rodwell might have thought to himself, well, there is no need to go at the moment. I might be able to go in 3 months or 4 months or 5 months. I'll see how this season starts or something like that. Or he might have said to himself...
But it wouldn't have necessarily stopped Manchester City from buying him, though, would it?
Well, yes, it might have done, because somebody at Everton might have said, look, Jack, as Steven Gerrard said to Everton's brilliant... head's gone, Mike,
No.
Everton's young England player, who was brilliant the other night in the Liverpool-Everton game. No, not Raheem Sterling. He plays for Liverpool. Ross Barkley, right? Ross Barkley's on the England bus with Steven Gerrard, and Steven Gerrard says to him, don't rush away from Everton too soon, OK?
Why were they on the same bus?
Because they're playing for England together.
Oh, I see.
OK?
Sorry.
You got it?
OK. I thought you said the other night.
No. Well, the other night,
you're not confusing me as well as confusing yourself.
The last England game, OK? I mean, keep up, will you?
I'm trying.
So what I'm saying is this. I'm saying that the free market should be allowed to prosper not only in football but outside of football. It does prosper everywhere outside of football, but it doesn't inside football. Now, China has a communist government but a free market economy. That's what football is trying to do in reverse.
It's got a free market economy for some people, I suppose.
Yeah, that's what football is doing in reverse. Football has got a non-free market policy, but a capitalist, very, very capitalist structure.
Isn't it something to do with the European Union, this as well?
Well,
they all have to kind of agree on a period of time where players are made available.
Which is totally to the disadvantage of the English clubs, because, of course, we start our season and have a month to go before the window closes, whilst the Europeans haven't. It completely disrupts our clubs. Marian Fellaini didn't go to Manchester United until after he played 3 games for Everton, and it's all a ludicrous load of nonsense.
And, of course, he could have gone at any time under your system, but Manchester United paid Everton more money probably than he was worth because they had to do it in the last minute. So that's market forces for you, for a good thing for Everton.
Worked to their advantage on that occasion, but if you can say, no, he ain't coming yet by the time the window closes, and he has another good 6 games, his value would have gone up even more, particularly if you think about it, because Manchester United's start was so poor.
Surely then you'd have to have football clubs with huge staffs to actually take care of trying to buy players all through the season, as opposed to concentrating on 1 month.
Mike, this is a very good point, but I can tell you now, some clubs have a unit called the transfer unit, which work for 30 consecutive days during transfer windows and don't work for the rest of the year.
So what do they do for the rest of the year?
Well, for the rest of the year, they've got other duties or whatever.
They're still looking at other players.
I tell you something, I know some clubs where the chairman completely signs off from everything in January and for the month in summer and says, you get on with the plans for the new stadium, you get on with plans for, the youth development scheme, you get on with the plans to redesign the club badge. I've got to concentrate on transfers and transfers only. It completely disrupts the footballing market, OK? Completely and utterly.
I agree that it's not perfect and it's not ideal. But
it's not perfect.
I can't think
ruinous.
of a better system. My idea would be to actually just have it as a shorter period of time, like a week instead of a month.
No, it's ruinous. That'd be even worse then, because the actual chaos that Kevin Phillips talks about tonight, as much as I enjoy watching the transfer window on TV, I'm siding on the opinion that there should be no January transfer window. I feel it can unsettle a lot of players, it can unsettle managers, and it can unsettle unsettle owners. For me, it's not the best thing for the game. Everybody's panicking and running around like headless chickens.
Yeah, but if it was the other way around, as you suggest, people would be unsettled throughout the whole season.
No, they wouldn't.
Players
No.
would always be being approached.
No.
Players would be being made offers by clubs.
I don't agree.
And their heads would be all over the place.
I don't agree. This system is ideally set up to allow agents, and not every agent is bad. I'm not saying that every agent's bad. Agents are actually quite a vital component of the modern game.
Aren't they?
Because otherwise the movement of players would be terribly much more slow. Well, much more pedantic, the moves. The agents tend to speed them up rather than slow them down. But what I'm saying is it makes agents very, very rich twice a year if they get one good deal. And that's what they go for during the transfer window. Whereas if there's not a window, there's no urgency for a player to say, I've got to go, because if I don't, I can't go for 6 months. And that's, I think, what prompts an awful lot of transfers. So, just remember all that, Mike.
Well,
next time you're trying to work out what's going on.
I don't think it would be better. I really don't. I mean, what about Everton? Have they done anything in the transfer window that you think is good? I mean, they've kept Leighton Baines on, I suppose, which is not a bad thing.
We've just signed a boy who's 6'8" tall, as you will know, because I tweeted out about it today.
Tall man, yes.
Said I might borrow your lunchbox to stand on.
Where does he? I wouldn't stand on my lunchbox if I were you.
Well, your lunchbox is so big because it's so full of hot
dogs. Lunchbox.
Yeah, sorry, no, I meant your sandwich
box.
I meant your sandwich. I meant your sandwich.
You don't know what you mean, do you?
Yeah,
you come in here in a state of high dudgeon because the transfer window doesn't agree with you.
No, not at all.
You're all over the place.
No, not at all. Lunchbox is a very crude term for the anatomy of a man, but you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about.
No, I don't actually. What are you talking about? What do you want to stand on exactly?
Your butty box. You can't walk around with a butty box full of sausage rolls and corned beef sandwiches because you're always feeling hungry. You've told me that in the past.
That's not true at all. It's another absolute calumny that you're trying to pass on everybody else. But I've got some surprising news for you coming up in a little while because you told me that you were a Latin expert, so we've got a little Latin test.
Excellent.
Because, of course, you claim that it's yet another language in which you excel, and I suspect we will be proving you wrong very, very shortly.
Veni, vini, vici.
That's wrong. It's Veni, Vidi, Vici.
Yeah, thank you. Right.
It's not Vini.
No, that was only my pronunciation.
Well, don't worry, we'll give you a proper test.
It depends on what dialogue of Latin you speak, from which part of the Roman Empire. Dialect, yeah.
He's in a terrible state tonight. Mike Parry and Mike Graham, the two Mikes, more next. This is Talk Sport Extra Time. I am Mike Graham. He is Mike Parry. We are the two Mikes. There will be an iTunes podcast out a little bit later on today.
Yeah.
Before the transfer window closes, I suggest. And before we get on to anything else, I want to give you this quick Latin test. It's just 4 very brief phrases.
Okay.
Some of them might be familiar to you. Some of them might not.
Okay.
I want you to search your memory and see whether you can get any of these right. I'm going to give you 4 phrases. The first one is this. Superbia in proelia.
It means superb is obviously superb, right?
No.
Superb in what?
Superb in proelia.
Superb in proelia means you must always try your hardest.
Yeah, not quite. It's Manchester City's motto, actually, and Manchester City's motto is translated
Why
as
would I know that?
Pride in battle.
Yeah, well, you must always try your hardest. Pride in battle means,
thing.
You've got to kill the enemy, so get on with it.
All right. Well, here's another one on a similar vein. Ordere est facere. Careful how you say that.
Yes, I know what that means. It means... just repeat that to me, please.
Ordere est facere.
Yes, it means work is its own reward.
No, nothing like that.
Wrong on so many levels.
This is the Spurs motto. It means to dare is to do.
Oh, yeah.
To dare is to do.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Nothing like that.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I walk around, mesmerised by the Spurs motto. Spurs are playing Everton in 2 weeks' time, and I've actually invited you along to the game.
Is that still going, that invite?
Yes, it's still going.
I'm looking forward to that.
Still going,
indeed. I hope the rain stops by then.
Yeah.
Right, here's another one that's a bit easier. Quone modo nunc fulve boss.
Say that again?
Quono modo nunc.
Yep.
Fulve boss.
That means that means always be prepared.
It means how now, brown cow.
But that's a ridiculous expression.
Why?
Because no Roman soldier of the great Roman Empire ever uttered the expression, how now, brown cow.
You wouldn't have any idea.
Do you know
what
why?
Because you don't speak Latin.
There were no cows around in those days, you fool.
What do you mean there were no cows
There
around?
were no cows around in Romans' days.
Why not?
Because there weren't any.
What did they use to pull the carts along then?
Oxen.
Oxen?
Yeah.
So there were oxen, but there weren't any cows?
Exactly.
How come?
Well, no brown cows, I'm telling you, because they hadn't been invented. They hadn't found them.
They hadn't been invented.
Come on, get on with it.
All right, the final one. Let's see if you get 1 out of 4. Sit vis nobiscum.
That means... What's it again?
Sit vis nobiscum.
Sit vis nobiscum means... never love your enemy.
May the force be with you.
May the force be with you. Yeah, well, that's exactly the same. That is
There's
exactly
nothing like it.
Do you
Wrong on so many levels.
If you knew anything about the classic languages like I do, Mike, you would know there are no literal interpretations of the Greek, ancient Greek, and Latin
Greek test
dialects.
as well.
Let me ask you one then. Nil satis nisi optimum.
Nil satis nisi optimum.
Yes.
No idea.
Nothing but the best. That's Everton's motto.
But
so
it shouldn't
stick
be.
that in your pipe
They
and
just
smoke
lost 4-0 to Liverpool. It shouldn't be their motto. They should change it.
Mike, what have I told you all your life? The least important game was the last one. The most important game is the next one.
Yeah,
so let's move on.
So
I heard you
many
trying
levels.
to peddle all that to David Ginola the other day on the Sports Breakfast.
Oh, really?
When, apparently he fell out with you. You told him he was a bit of a lazy footballer and he's now
No, I
no
didn't.
longer your friend. I think that's the end of a beautiful friendship for you.
No, I didn't. What had happened is that we were reading a report in which one player was said to have been economical with his energy efforts in a game, okay, i.e. hadn't tried hard enough. And I just threw it to my friend David, who, of course, played for Everton. David, were you ever accused of being economical with your energy? That was a question.
Right.
It's
quite a rude question.
No.
though.
It was, with a twinkle in my eye, because David's got a sense of humour and all that. Of course, Mr. Brazil only leans over, doesn't he? And, David, Porky's calling you a lazy git. I said, no, I'm not, Al. He says, yes, he is, David. Lazy git is... And David's full of note with you, Porky. It doesn't... And, that just causes problems.
We're no
Anyway.
longer friends.
Yeah, yes, of course we are. Of course we are.
Well, we shall see. We shall see. Now, let's talk about something very important, which is about school holidays, because I saw this story the other day, and there's been loads of it over the course of the last couple of days because of various campaigns that have been launched. Lots of parents are saying it's outrageous that prices are so high, that we have to take our children out of school. And this is one of those things that I don't think is ever going to be solved, is it? They're now saying what they should do is actually make school terms longer so that the holidays are shorter, which is only going to push the prices up even more. Now, what it's going to mean is that a lot of parents can't afford to go away. But I was staggered, actually, because I was watching it on TV yesterday, and this woman was complaining that she couldn't afford to take her kids away to some place that she'd taken them the year before. And, I was thinking to myself, well, since when did it become an absolute rite of passage that you had to take your children on holiday? I mean, if you can't afford to take them on holiday, you shouldn't take them, should you?
I totally agree. And this side about complaining. Now, look, there's a story in this morning's Daily Mail. Parents' fury, a school governor takes daughter out of class to save £5,000 on cost of holiday. This guy, what's his name? Mr. Lawton. God, he used to be a great player for Everton, Tommy Lawton. One of the all-time greats, yeah. And Jimmy Lawton,
and
actually.
James Lawton, the great sports writer.
Exactly, James Lawton, great sports writer with me on the Express. Right, now this guy, what he did, he's school governor, Paul Lawton, but he ignored the anti-truanting laws to take 13-year-old daughter Lucy Ann out of school for 11 days so they can enjoy a fortnight in Spain. He then came back and quite happily paid a £190 fine to magistrates for taking his daughter out of school because it saved him £5,000. That's cynical.
Well, it's cynical, but you can understand why people do it.
No, I can't understand why people do it.
What a lot of schools now do is they'll fine you something like £20 per child if you take them out, or
Right.
maybe. But I mean, the amount of money that you save by taking kids away outside of the school term is absolutely prodigious. Like you just said, I mean, if you save £5,000, then why wouldn't he do it?
But if everybody did that, there'd be no school weeks for certain time there. So you've got to clamp down on it. The other thing is, Mike,
you can't really stop him. I mean, it's the same as another story that I know you've been railing about and passing all sorts of untruths about me about the smoking in cars. I mean, there's only so much you can do with parents. There's only so much you can kind of control the way that parents choose to raise their children.
Yeah, OK, fair enough. But what you're doing here is you're saying, I'm going to actually beat the laws of economics. Look, the school holidays are long enough. There's 8 weeks in the summer, isn't there? Or
there
6
is.
weeks?
There
6
is.
weeks, 8 weeks, something like that in the summer.
But during that whole period, the price of everything doubles.
Yeah, but of course it does, because it's all about supply and demand. Do you know anything about basic economics?
I do.
Do you know, for instance, if you went to the butty shop now and there were 2 butties left and 50 people were queuing up for those 2 butties, right, because there was a national butty shortage, the guy at the back of the queue shouted forward, I'll give you £5 for the corned beef sandwich.
Why wouldn't he just go next door to another butty shop?
Well, because
there's no queue?
Because there's a national shortage of sandwiches, right? £5 for the corned beef sandwich. The shop owner would say, right, it's yours. And if a guy halfway down the queue said, I'll give you £10 for the corned beef sandwich, said, right, it's yours.
It's complete madness.
It's not madness. This is the way economics works, don't you understand? So it's supply and demand. So the point is, in those 6 weeks of the summer holidays, there's only a certain number of seats on aeroplanes. Everybody wants to get on them. The only way to make sure that it happens in orderly fashion is for the free market enterprise scheme in which we live kicks into fashion and unfortunately pushes the prices up.
Yeah.
So
that is the case, and parents aren't able to deal with that, then I think occasionally they should be within their rights to take their kids out of school, particularly if they're in.
We haven't even talked.
School.
We haven't even talked about the damage to the child's education.
Yeah, but if they're in primary school, they miss a week. I mean, we're now being told by teachers that they'll never catch up in an entire month. I mean, I know what the kids are taught in primary school. Believe me, they can miss a week, and it doesn't really matter that much.
And will you come back and teach your children all they've missed in that week?
Well, if I take my kids away out of school, they learn an awful lot more on their travels with me than they would actually sitting in a classroom.
Honestly, you sound like the jerks who went to the Isle of Wight Festival when Bob Dylan appeared there in 1968, and when asked why they'd taken their children out of school, they said, "Hey, man," while they were smoking cannabis joints, "Hey, man, my kids will learn more from 3 hours of Dylan than 3 years in school, man.
Well, they
Dylan
might be right
rules
about
the world."
But,
sounds to me like you might have been smoking a funny fag or two.
I'm not taking my kids anywhere near a concert by Bob Dylan or by anybody else. If I take them on holiday, travel broadens the mind. That's what everybody says. And you're very fortunate. You spent most of your life travelling around the world at somebody else's expense. You've never had to pay for a holiday in your life.
Travel broadens. Actually, I haven't been on holiday for about 20 years.
20 years?
Yeah, I was just thinking the other day. I haven't been on holiday for 20 years.
Why not?
I don't like holidays. I don't like hot places, and that's where most holidays are.
Why don't you go somewhere cold?
I do. I went to Iceland twice, and it was very enjoyable.
When did you go there?
I went there once 14 years ago, and I went.
So you haven't been on holiday for 20 years?
Well, it wasn't really a holiday. It was an exploratory trip because I wanted to find out what Iceland was like.
So you weren't working?
No, I wasn't working. No, but
did you pay for the trip?
Oh, I paid for it. Yeah.
So it's a holiday then?
No, it wasn't. I wanted to find out what Iceland was like because I am a student of Nordic history, and I wanted to find out exactly what was going on.
You shouldn't have gone to Iceland then, should you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
You
yeah.
should not have gone to Norway.
Well, do you know they have there's a place in Scotland where they have a Nordic festival every time this time of year.
Don't they?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. What's that called?
I can't remember. It begins with an H.
Well, you should know. You lived up there.
Yeah,
No,
I
it doesn't
can't
begin
remember.
with H. It begins with L. It's called Lucas.
It's not called Lucas.
It is. It's called Lucas.
Lucas is where the RAF base is.
No, I'm sure it's called Lucas or something like that. But anyway, they all dress up as Vikings. I'm going to go there one year and dress up as a Viking. And
You won't need much makeup.
that's a bit harsh, isn't it?
Vikings were very tall and blonde, weren't they?
Do you know Vikings didn't wear horns on their helmets, Mike? Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
No, they didn't. Honestly, that was all.
Well, where did that come from?
Well, some film in 1930 made in Hollywood with all these Vikings with horns on, but they don't actually wear horns on their helmets.
Well, that's a very valuable piece of information.
Yeah, well,
Thank you
you'd
very
like
much.
to know
That's
that,
the one
yeah.
thing you found out when you went to Iceland.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, absolutely. I went to the Nordic Museum.
Uphellia is apparently the name of the place in Scotland.
What's it called?
Uphellia.
Uphellia, that's it. I knew it was something like that. Well, that
So it
sounds
doesn't
more
give
like
it an L or a V.
Well, it sounds more like Lucas than the name you gave me.
Well, Lucas is where the RAF base was, I can tell you
yeah.
that. Loads more to come. More madness from Mike Porky Parry and myself, Mike Graham, next. This is TalkSport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. He is Mike Parry. We are the two Mikes. Yeah, talk about Iceland, actually. I went to Iceland a few years ago, and the thing that struck me about Iceland was there were no trees there at all.
What were you doing in Iceland?
I was actually flying to America via Iceland. You could go Iceland Air, and they did this great thing where you could fly, because out of Scotland it was quite difficult to get a direct flight into the United States with that. Is that yes for Icelandic?
Yes, that's right, it is. Yeah,
Well, and rather than flying to Heathrow or go through Schiphol or go through Manchester or something like that, you could actually fly a stop in Keflavik at the airport there and go to the Blue Lagoon. I don't know if you went to
the Blue Lagoon, yeah. No,
which
it's
is
great.
A big, like, hot spring.
Yeah.
And I didn't see a tree.
Now, funny you should talk about trees in Iceland, because that's another thing that I've got a bugbear about today.
Oh, you don't want to talk about Iceland anymore then? Is that it?
By the way, I've just been reminded, you know that Nordic museum I went to, the Viking Museum? Apparently that's in Copenhagen. Anyway, but I thought it was in Iceland.
Well, there's one in York as well, funny enough.
Oh, there's one in York as well. But no, there is a lot of Nordic history up in Iceland. Now, trees, I'm glad you mentioned trees, and I'll tell you why. Now, my housekeeper does the weekly shopping for me, right?
Mrs. Mop.
No.
As she's become known.
Well, that's not very nice, is it? Not really,
Well, it's not very nice to make her do all the hard work around the house.
Hard-working woman, and nothing wrong with that. Now, point is, she gets all the stuff, and she sticks like all the polishing things in the polishing cupboard and all that kind of stuff. And
You've got a polishing cupboard.
well, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? And
Not really.
And all the food goes in the fridge, obviously. And the loo rolls go in the kitchen cabinet, right? So I'm getting something out of the kitchen cabinet, and I see this packet of loo rolls, and you won't believe it. There's this notice on it, which says, and it's got a picture of a tree. And it says, and it's shaped like a Christmas tree, it says, for every tree we use, we plant 3.
Yeah. What's wrong with that?
Well, it's so ludicrous that if that's true...
Well, that'd be some kind of ecological thing, won't it?
No,
That'd
but
be,
hang on.
recycled paper or something like
Well,
that?
just think about it. Just think about it. For every tree that's knocked down to make paper,
Yeah.
whether it's for newspapers or loo roll or kitchen roll or textbooks or the other 1,000,001 things that paper's used for, they're replacing them with 3 more trees.
Right.
It means in, 50 years' time, the whole planet will be covered in trees, won't it?
How do you work that out?
Well, where are you going to plant all these trees?
Well, you have to first of all remember that trees have been being cut down for years and years and years, and other people haven't been replacing them. Right?
No,
So
no,
there's loads of
nonsense.
space for
This is
trees
not. This is
that have
nonsense.
been cut down.
This is nonsense. This
Half
is
the Amazon's disappeared.
no. Half the Amazon might have disappeared. In fact, it's not half. It's more like a third. But you know that of the third that's disappeared, 2/3 of it has already regrown to a sustainable level because nature
people have been
reinvents
planting
itself.
trees.
No, nature reinvents itself. I mean, the thing is, when you cut a tree down.
Yeah.
And you say, for every one we cut down, we'll plant 3. You couldn't plant 3 trees on the area where you've cut the tree from for 2 reasons. Firstly, there's only room for 1 tree. And secondly, you can't plant a tree on top of the stump of an old tree because you'd have to take the roots of the tree out, which sometimes go 30 or 40 feet into the ground. In fact, I've got a theory, and this is a very serious one, which is backed up by a lot of planetary...
Absolutely speechless.
No,
This is unbelievable. Even for you, this is unbelievable.
No, I'm telling you. So it means they've got to go and plant those trees somewhere else.
Well, they could move slightly to the left or to the right and plant some more.
Rubbish in the middle of a forest. If you cut a tree down, the roots are still there. You can't plant a tree there. So that means they've got to go and colonise some country somewhere and say, oh, sorry, can we borrow your country? Because we're cutting trees down in Canada. But there's no room left in Canada. So we're going to plant all these trees in Montana or Alaska or somewhere like that.
Have you ever been to Alaska or Montana?
Yes,
I mean,
I have.
There's an awful lot of room there to plant as many trees as you like.
Yeah, but if you take it to its ultimate conclusion, if you're taking 1 tree off the earth and replacing it with 3, then eventually the whole world will be covered in trees.
That would be true if indeed everybody was doing it, but of course everybody's not doing it because you've got these logging companies in Brazil who are totally kind of demolishing the rainforest
And
at a rate of knots and not replacing any of it.
No, the Amazon regrows behind them. If it didn't, there wouldn't be any trees left in the world.
Oh, what, so they have to move really quickly just in case the advancing trees kind of somehow
Don't
get
be
them.
ridiculous. You know exactly what I'm talking about. For instance, when there's all these fires in Australia, which burn all the bush and all that kind of stuff, and you get them, of course, in California all the time.
And they destroy all the trees.
Yeah, but they regrow within months, and then within years they've regrown back. It happens all the time. And
Well, that's
why?
because scorched earth can actually become quite fertile.
Yes, exactly. And why these nutters think that we have to be given this propaganda? Oh, don't worry, we cut one. And also, how can it be cost effective to go around saying, right, we're going to make 100 million packets of loo roll, right? But the cost of it is so prohibitive because for every piece of paper we put into a loo roll, we have to provide 3 pieces of paper outside of the loo roll to compensate
presumably
for,
they've got a way of planting
putting
trees
it in the loo
which
roll.
has been worked out so that they still make money as a company. I mean, maybe I suggest you should just buy a different product. You should buy a different kind that doesn't do that.
I think it's propaganda. By the way, the other thing I was going to tell you about trees, and there is a scientific basis to this. Do you know that trees, which of course are alive, trees are orgasms, aren't they? You accept
They're
that?
what?
Trees are alive.
They're not orgasms, though.
No, they're organic. They're organic. They're not orgasm, but there's organic movement within trees. You accept that, right?
I accept that they're alive, yes.
And one of the reasons why there's so many floods in this country is because we have chopped down so many trees, and therefore the roots of the trees are not soaking up the water, which they should have done. But the roots of the trees can go so far into the ground. There's an honest belief that the nerve endings of trees can touch each other across continents. Not just fields or
What, so they actually
counties.
go underneath the seabed? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm telling you that
No, let's take 2 continents, right? Let's take Europe and let's take North America.
Yeah.
What you're saying is if roots of trees can touch themselves, they must be going underneath the seabed.
There is a theory
Underneath the Atlantic Trench.
There is a theory that tree sensibilities can go for hundreds of miles. Put it that way.
A theory from whom?
Well,
That's one you made up the other day.
No. A theory from ecologists. And anyway, what are you talking about seabeds for? There isn't necessarily a seabed division between continents, is there?
Eh?
North America and South America?
Yeah.
Which sea? Which sea does divide it?
Well, that's all part of the same continent, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's not. North America and South America are different continents. Europe and
the
Asia.
Caribbean Sea separates them.
What about Europe and Asia?
Europe and Asia? What about it?
Well, there's only the Bosphorus, the river, you know, and then this huge sea, is there? So, you know...
Well, there's plenty of sea around Asia.
Before you rubbish my theory, just remember that, you know, these things can happen. It's a scientific theory that this is...
Well, if that was the case, then they could solve the flooding problem down the Somerset levels by just planting loads of trees.
That's what they should
in
do.
The Somerset levels, and they would suck all the water up.
Mike, that is what they should do, because I think I've told you before, one of the reasons why water is retained on the ground, for two reasons. Firstly, if you knock down trees, then the tree roots are not sucking up the water, which they used to do. And secondly, so many crazy people these days in their little houses go around digging up the grass in their front garden, putting paving stones down, and then parking the car in front of their lounge window.
Well, they do that in London. They don't really do that in the country.
They do it everywhere. Parking in front of their lounge window, so they don't have to pay £2.40 a day to park on the street in front of their house, which is a disgrace.
Well, that's another thing.
Which is absolute disgrace.
Another thing the nanny state has brought in, isn't it? Because this is what we're going to talk about as well. This whole idea about banning people from smoking in cars if they've got children in the car. Right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, anybody who smokes in a car with their kids is a complete idiot, and it's not something that they should do. But even
you
Nick
defended
Clegg,
it the other day.
Even Nick Clegg. Well, what I'm defending is the right of somebody to do it. If they wish to do it, that's entirely up to them. I mean, you can criminalise people only so much. You can criminalise people for parking on the street. You can criminalise people for throwing litter. Now they want to criminalise people for smoking in a car, in their own car, with children in the car.
I think they should.
Well, I don't think they should. I think there's a lot more things that they could be making sure are working properly. Like, for example, the number of kids who are mistreated in this country, the number of kids who've got parents who are on some kind of watch register.
You don't think that...
And yet what happens is, you know, some tragedy happens and we get the lessons will be learned thing, and it continues. And
so you don't think putting a kid into what is effectively a mobile gas chamber,
I don't think it's a very good idea at all.
In which an adult is smoking is not child abuse?
I don't think it's child... I don't think it's a good idea. Of course it's child abuse. It's not a good idea. However, real child abuse is going on up and down the country.
But that is real child abuse.
Well, it's not the same
Passive smoking imposed upon your children. That's cruel.
Well, it's all about a sense of proportion. I think the people in this country, an awful lot of people, have lost their sense of proportion. This is not one of the most important things to do. And also, we've got fewer police officers now. Are they supposed to be going around arresting people for smoking in their cars? It's a nonsense. I mean, even Nick Clegg, who is not exactly somebody I agree with very often, has said this is a totally unworkable law. There is no point in passing it.
Well,
it's nonsense.
I think Nick Clegg's got it wrong, but then politicians get it wrong on so many levels. When I was a kid, Mike, we used to go to a school, myself and my two sisters, that was a good sort of 10 miles from home, right? And it was on the route that my dad used to take to go to work, because he worked on Merseyside. We lived in Chester, OK? And, I mean, I just remember to this day, and I can only have been, I've worked it out in my head, you know, through looking back on my life. I was probably about 6 or 7 at the time. My dad used to sit in that car. It was a Morris Minor estate, you know, with all that wood on the back.
And everything,
yeah, that's right.
Shooting brake.
Shooting brake, thank you, that's it, yeah. And driving along, and I remember, you know, he'd smoke continuously. He even had an ashtray, you know, stuck on his dashboard to put his cigarettes
cars
out
all
in.
used to have ashtrays in it.
Yeah, but no, this was like one of them you stick on with a sucker, you know what I mean? So he had easier access to it. The windows were closed, and we were breathing his smoke all the way there. I remember...
Well, that explains a lot. Maybe you've got some kind of nicotine poisoning in your brain.
No.
Did you ever think that you were being abused?
Well, I used to worry why, you know, my blazer always smelt of, like, I don't know, something funny. I didn't know what it was. We used to sit at home on a Saturday night watching Morecambe and Wise with the door shut and the log fire roaring. We didn't have a central heating. And my mum smoked Woodbine. She gave up about 40 years ago. My dad smoked Capstan Full Strength. They used to smoke all night long. And, I mean, at the end of the night, there was this hazy fog. And I do remember going to bed with a sore throat quite often. I mean, that is an outrageous and ridiculous way of life for a family to live.
And by and large,
if you think that a car...
people don't do it anymore.
If you think that a car is a much smaller enclosed space than a lounge in which you're watching television, you can see how dangerous it is to children. And for you to even contemplate the idea of saying it's an infringement of liberties means that I'm afraid you have once again got your responsibilities as a parent completely wrong.
Yeah, well, you would know a lot about the responsibilities of a parent. I mean,
I
my
certainly
parents
would,
used to drive me around Europe without a seatbelt on autobahns and everything else because that was the way it used to be in those days. There were no seatbelts.
Did you ever bash your head on the windscreen?
I never did, no, because, you know, my mother was a very careful driver. The point is that, you know, life
Your
has
mother
changed.
used to drive?
My father never drove.
Oh, really?
He tried to pass his test once and he failed. failed.
Really?
And he decided he was never going to take the test
Oh,
again.
that was it. So your mum driving around Europe?
So he used to navigate.
What were you doing driving around Europe? What were you looking for?
We were going on holiday.
On holiday? Where to?
We used to go to Italy on holiday. We'd drive all the way across. We'd take the ferry to Calais, and we'd drive
Really?
across France, drive across Luxembourg.
Why didn't you
drive
just get
across
on an aeroplane like
Germany.
everybody else?
Well, because there weren't as many aeroplanes in those days. It
As
wasn't, and
many
also it was an
aeroplanes.
adventure. It was a great
Yeah,
adventure.
a great adventure. I don't know. What are Italian motorway service stations like?
Very good.
Oh,
Much
really?
better than English ones,
Yeah, probably full of Italian food, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they speak Latin as well.
They speak
You'd have no
Latin,
chance there.
Yeah.
Mike Porky Parry, with his mad ideas, will be back, of course, on Monday night.